Oh, I could do
Doing
that
all that.
a lot easier actually. Let's come over here, dashboard. Yeah, so I could send you the Twitch link. I could send you the um, YouTube, D Live, Periscope, Facebook. Which one do you prefer?
Um, I just learned about DLive a minute ago, so just Twitch or YouTube, either one doesn't matter. But
Okay.
is this it's not public? We're not publishing. Yeah,
No, it's live right now.
it is being. We are okay. So great,
It's live, Dory. No one's watching.
great. No one's
Um,
watching,
no one's watching.
but
Right.
they could
So
be if they wanted.
exactly. Yeah, they could be if they wanted to. Oh, I've got myself in a bit of a situation here. I can't be able to change. No, no. Okay, quit, quit.
My Bluetooth just said low battery as well, so
Oh
that may
no.
need to change. Shall I run and it'll just take a minute? I got another one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Go, go, go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I shall. Okay, I'll have to send it to you using a different machine. Brave. Oh, great. Where's a charger? I look forward to the day when chargers are no longer a thing.
That's what I'm going to accomplish in this long poetry thing. The
Okay.
poetry's so strong it creates a radio frequency that charges all devices.
Actually, what we're talking about, you could actually just go to cast .live and you can be able to see the stream from there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, with three A's. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can't see my screen, can you?
As you type, no, no, no. I mean, not unless you share your screen here on um on Discord. I feel like your audio might be a bit low, so just try and turn it up a little bit here.
And I can
You can what?
I'm going to jump off of cast.
Ah, okay, yeah, but you've seen it though, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, in the middle, I've got the 6 points. Ah,
Yep.
you know what I was hoping to do? I was hoping to have like a little timer for the 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna eyeball it for the moment. I'll use my phone here.
Actually, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to grab some more coffee.
Wow, you drink an awful lot of coffee. Right. What am I trying to do? Timer, 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 timer. There you are. Um, timer 5. Should I tell you what? Per segment. Shall we do 6 minutes? 5 minutes? Not
For the,
sure.
let's just go with 5.
5, yeah? Okay, yeah. I was actually just thinking out loud. Actually, wasn't asking you, but yeah, thanks for for contributing. All right, cool. Okay, so before I actually start that, I'll just quickly just I suppose give some sort of an intro and some context to this, right? So this is a test, a very early draft test of conversations that we're hoping to have, conversations around the intersection of creativity and computation, right? Inspired by Ada Lovelace, and these are conversations that we're hoping to have on the 10th of December, Ada Day, right?
Yep.
And part of the format of these conversations is to have someone from a creative discipline, come on and sort of, give us context, give us, insight the um, into their into the discipline, and then to sort of explore and discuss and discover ways in which crypto can actually, the fundamental change that crypto introduces can change the nature of that discipline, right? In the context of this particular conversation, we're talking about poetry. So the points that we're going to be talking about are obviously listed here in between us. So we'll start off with Lovelace, and then talk about linguistics, artistic code, poetical science, haiku code, and then finally finish with crypto experiment. In a way to sort of give us sort of like here's a practical thing that right now you can actually go away and start exploring in the context of poetry and crypto. Right, so without further ado, let us actually just jump straight into it. Yeah, I'll start. Okay, so that's 5 minutes. Do you wanna just start the, I suppose, gradual conversation? So what are you? So in terms of Lovelace, let's start there. What are you thinking? Like, how does the creativity of poetry relate to computation in the context of Ada Lovelace herself?
For Ada Lovelace, she was born almost out of poetry from her
Mm.
father, Lord Byron, and
Yeah.
she was conditioned by her mother, who was a mathematician. So she never knew her father. He left when she was 5 weeks old. So she was raised by her mother, who was a mathematician, which at the time was, pretty much frowned upon. Women were not really allowed to do things at this time. So just from there, she was born into this position of, from poetry and into math and computation. And then, one of the things that was most interesting to me was the fact that at 11 years old, she wrote a book called Flyology,
Mm.
in which she outlined what I would consider the birth of the steampunk genre. She created a flying horse powered by steam, which is a pretty big task. And her book outlines mathematical and proportionate ratios to actually make this magical beast, this mechanical beast, fly. So she was creative, to say the least. And the relationship with her father, being Lord Byron, it was just something natural to her.
That's quite interesting. Wait, so given that actually I don't know much about this, like, it's interesting, to sort of to get, like, your insight from it. Wait, so what's the balance in terms of like the practical the practical builds that she actually sort of, I suppose, prototyped or tried out, compared to, like, just sort of like Da Vinci-esque, sketches of, like, here's what this thing could be.
Well, she was already familiar, it was the steam revolution. So she had already known the power of steam. She had known the power of math. And she took the Da Vinci-esque models, so to speak, drew them out, and then added math.
Interesting.
if I answered that question. If not, I can try again.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did, but in a very sort of like surface level. So I mean, are there like money? What the hell? What's the word I'm looking for? Manuscripts and like, were there any like physical prototypes? I suppose.
I have not found any yet.
Oh, okay.
I've still been searching. There's some
Yeah.
articles on it. Flyology. That's what she called. She called this was flyology.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I
So
haven't really found that.
yeah, but I mean, that's really interesting. Yeah, and the whole like steampunk aesthetic and movement is an interesting one, right? Because, and again, here, if you look at sort of technologies, how the fundamental energy engine, right, whether it's steam or nowadays with oil, and then now moving into electricity, or I mean, electricity has been there for a while, but us now transitioning more towards that, and sort of how central of a role that plays. But anyway, I digress.
I would like to say something about all that, though.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Steam, powers, centers of power, steam, electricity, nuclear, all of these things can explode. These very, very things are all controlled. So, we've always been on the verge of just blowing ourselves up.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting how like all these other things sort of like, wait, stop, okay, time's up, stop, cancel.
Okay, great.
Oh, come on. Okay, I get it. Repeat. And the phone's like, okay. Yes. So I suppose, yeah. Well, the point that sort of I wanted to make with a reference to the engine of energy, with every kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Point in history, in terms of sort of technological advancement, is interesting how to sort of see how it sprouts, or sort of emerges from that, and how sort of everything sort of if the engine was sort of like a ball, you see all of these sort of roots and sort of branches from them sort of stemming out from that in a sort of interesting way. I feel like whilst we've sort of spoken about Ada Lovelace and somewhat how it relates to both the creativity and the what's it called, the computation, the computation element, I feel like it would be interesting to, I don't know whether or not we ought to sort of discuss the Babbage, because you've spoken about her, her younger years. Do you perhaps want to? I'm painfully aware that we're past the 5 minutes, but yeah, let's just cover that a little bit, then we can sort of proceed.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Charles Babbage said after he had reviewed some numbers, some math based on whatever it was, he said, there's so many errors in here, I wish this had been done by steam, meaning his adding machine, his mainframe for a computer, which was really an industrial heavy machinery powered by steam with turning knobs that would just put numbers onto cards or paper, if you will. So but that's all that he saw. It was Ada that came along and said, hey, these numbers represent more. She was able to see beyond that.
Interesting. Wait, so is what you're referencing there the analytical machine?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting, I suppose, to sort of explore and to explore more about this fundamentally. Because when I think of the analytical machine, I think of the Enigma, the Enigma machine, with all the sort of the cogs turning, yeah, and that sort of a thing. But anyway, so I mean, I think suffice it to say, the analytical machine was basically the first computer as we know it. You know, sort of first digital computer or machine slash computer.
You know,
right?
I struggle calling it a digital only, because it does use the digits. You know, it does use numbers.
Yeah.
Very different from digital as we know it today.
Well,
You know,
electronics.
you have a seven-ton calculator that we have on our phone now.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. Okay, now let's actually move on. If I can find, there we go. Try to find the slides. Okay, so moving on to linguistics. There ought to be some sort of a chime or something whenever we change topics. Yeah. Okay, now let me reset this thing.
We could do it like the debates, except actually have it ding and then just mute you.
Exactly. Yeah, because you know I just keep on yapping. Okay, yeah. So linguistics. Yeah. What are you thinking about how this relates?
Linguistics. There's a formula to it in every language. You know, you have your structure of sentence formation. So there's automatically a mathematical component to it, a geometrical component to it, and beyond that, there's a psychological. Psychological event that happens inside the mind.
I feel like a good reference here is actually one of the many one of the many links that you share was a link to I think an HBR article which spoke about I suppose it was beyond the nature of like syntax. It was talking about like I suppose the atomic elements, right? The symbol and the symbolized, or is it the signal and the
Yes, the sign and the signifier.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Ferdinand de Saussure's semiology. You know, a small branch of semiotics, but ultimately, the idea, the theory is nothing exists outside of signs. And today and forever, nothing we understand or know, we don't have a picture of before or when it's said. So it can be argued that there's nothing that exists, not even ourselves, outside of language. Because language includes signs, it includes syntax, it includes code. Machines know this. If you can't put language into the machine, it's back to Babbage's. Actually, it erases Babbage's because he has numbers on there. So a number is a sign, a number is a language. You know, what does number 1 mean to you? What does the 99% mean to you? And then what do this plethora of icons mean? What's a stop sign mean? You know, these are things that automatically implant a meaning and a representation, and usually an action. You know, simply changing the color of text has a different effect on a person. When my professors would mark up my papers and use red, I often felt like I was at a stop sign. I did not want to read anymore. That's why I run into many stop signs. I tear them down. There's no stop signs in my life.
Cool. Okay, right. So, I was gonna ask a question which I feel like actually might move away from in a way linguistics. So I feel like within linguistics, it's more about syntax. It's more about sort of the kind of purely functional aspect of language. And I was gonna ask, like, from that kind of cold, strictly functional environment, I suppose this would actually be a good question to sort of transition onto artistic code, right? What do you like? Poetry, often when people talk about poetry, is they talk about beauty, right? Sort of like an intangible, highly subjective thing. So how do you define, or how do you see the emergence of that from the functional, sort of cold environment, so to speak?
Right. So I would probably say that if you go from structure is almost like the mainframe or the rules, or just the idea of how things flow. But once you apply the words, that's where the art comes in, and that's where it creates an event. So I think you've got your framework, and then you add the words, and that's what it sends the spark to the receptors to create an event or action, and that's where the art comes in. That's where the feeling comes in. Art is born from feeling. Someone that's doesn't feel anything can't really be an artist, because it comes from the passion.
That's interesting. So is that exclusive? Like in a way, one could interpret what you just said as, there are the chosen few who are creative and those who are not. Like where does that sense of creativity or pattern recognition, sort of combining, I suppose, different things that don't usually go together, like where is that born out of? Like,
it's something that we all are. There's no one that's not an artist or a creator. If you engage in society and you talk, you're creating something. Every moment, every part and time is your artboard, and it's a moment to express yourself. So while someone may not consider themselves an artist or a creator, they just don't really realize the tool bag that they have, which is the use of words.
Interesting. All right, so actually, have you got anything? I feel like there's a lot more that we could sort of dig into here. Yeah, but stuff is not. Yeah, I feel like this particular iteration, or this particular topic, is actually quite dense, and we could get into
linguistics is very difficult. I mean, it's it's a broad field.
All right, tell you what, let's then now just jump into, I mean, unless you've got anything else that you particularly want to add in terms of artistic code, we can then sort of jump into poetical science.
Well, the one thing that I would like to say about artistic code is that artists have been using code for a long time. Take Da Vinci, The Last Supper, and the movie The Da Vinci Code, if you will. It's the easiest. How many signs and symbols and hidden clues are there in that? We've all for forever been looking for this map that has X. Here's the treasure. You don't think of map as art, but honestly, the art of map making is, it's an art, it's a science, but there's really nothing that exists that's not part science, part art.
Yeah, that I agree actually. And what's interesting, actually, the thought that came to mind was, from you just saying that, is whilst there are those who are more creative and or more artistic and those who are more sort of logical in their view of the world and their skill set as well, right? More and more, we're getting to a point where I suppose a lot of the resources in the world are accruing to those who are more logical, right? Those who can program, etc., etc. You know, like this is kind of manifested with the nature of the startup, right? You know, you have all these tech companies. You know, I suppose in the context of like San Francisco, like, you know, you have the wage disparity, you know, or wealth disparity, you know, increasing more and more. And especially now with the pandemic, you know, we are sort of experiencing quite a shift where people are gonna need to reskill and sort of retool, and most won't be able to, in a way, sort of engage in the same way in this new sort of online by default arena, so to speak, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. You know, this whole the 2020 has presented an opportunity that we didn't really quite prepare for, or you know, try to envision the world, you know, for a while coming to a complete stop. In regards to the Silicon Valley wage disparity things, we realized, if you look at what's going on, people from Silicon Valley are now moving out. A lot of tech companies are allowing their people to go out. So, you know, work is not performed in a zip code. It's performed in the mind and in the medium of collaboration. And to bring anything good out of the pandemic, it's been wonderful to network and be able to attend conferences in Tokyo, Amsterdam, London, San Francisco in a day. I mean, we've just basically created time travel, and also, you know, kind of a multiplicity of ourselves to be able to be in so many spots at one time. I mean, that's like teleporting almost. You know, it's truly amazing.
yeah, and to have met, you know, folks like you and, you know, others that we've both met within the community. Yeah, teleporting, I think, you know, is a really good word for it. And it's weird because, you know, like the folks who have sort of met, like, you know, I keep on sort of thinking or feeling like they are somewhat like co-founders, you know, although like they're working in a different sort of department, but, you know, we're all working for, you know, some, you know, this weird emergent startup in a decentralized way.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
The funny thing, you know, I have a background in insurance, and that's what I do, you know, for a daily basis. I consult with a lot of insurtech startups, from your full-blown decentralized insurance companies, you know, to go back to maybe the idea of a decentralized financial system. You know, let's get rid of insurance companies, or let's get rid of intermediaries, the middleman. I'm the middleman. I asked them what their background in insurance is, and they have none. But they're able to engage and raise a lot of money just by saying, yo, insurance, your shit's broken, we're gonna fix it. And you know, it's funny, people are like, yeah, I'll put money on that. Like that, you know, that's an easy bet. Like, how could you not make insurance better?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's so sort of fundamental. Okay, cool. Now, let's move on to not social, political science.
yes, political science was just a phrase. It's not just a phrase, but it's the phrase that Ada Lovelace coined, and it's the one that really grabbed my attention, because you don't really talk about the two together, and the poet and the scientist rarely talk to one another. So Ada was in a unique position to talk to herself, you know, mentally, to have these conversations. Imagine the power a person like Ada Lovelace would have today if she didn't get lost in all the noise, but, you know, to have other people to collaborate with, you know. 1815, you could travel was a huge deal. Took a long time, quite dangerous as well. But now, you know, the science of travel, the poetics of traveling, you know, the digital nomad. These are things that are born out of, you know, science as a geography as a science, and then poetics, you know, is something of a feeling. You know, so you can be truly led by your feelings. More specifically, poetical science. One of Ada Lovelace's statements was, if you can't give me poetry, can't you at least give me poetical science? I don't know who she was saying that to, or if she wrote it. I feel like it could have been to her father, but also possibly to Charles Babbage. I'd like to look and see exactly where that came from. But what is poetical science? I think my best way to describe poetical science is nature. Look at the butterfly. You know, there's been tons of poetry written on butterflies and flowers, but and that's science. It's, you know, it's nature. It's everything around us. There's always a mathematical equation to everything that happens in the universe, people will say. And adding the artistic element to that math is almost a science in itself.
Yeah, it's interesting in a way. Like, I suppose what this all sort of. I'm on mute. Okay. Okay. I muted it on here because I thought that somehow I forgot that you can only hear me through Discord, and I was afraid that in me talking, it then fed back in a weird way through OBS, and you know, there's sort of like, you know, a double version of it because I've also got my mic directly in OBS. So anyway, that tangent aside, yeah, so I feel like at the core what this talks about is the relationship, the symbiotic relationship between what we I suppose have come to understand is sort of right brain thinking and left brain thinking.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know where the objective and the subjective fall in left brain, right brain, but that's really kind of what we're looking at, you know. Objective thought patterns versus subjective thought patterns.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a bunch to be said here for like how this in a way practically manifests, in a way going back to, you know, the conversation about, you know, are we divided between those who can and those who cannot, you know, and if so, what sort of environment can we create to encourage, you know, to encourage that balance of, you know, of both, of the creative with the sort of the computational, or the right brain and the left brain.
Yeah, we're only divided because we choose to be, and some people do not want to collaborate or work together. They don't really need people, or they don't think that they do. Most of this division is not arguing the two sides of the coin, but rather not even realizing that there's a coin. You know, meaning we don't see how we're in common. We don't see that even if we do share everything, we have a common goal. Throughout the journey to reach that goal, there's going to be areas of opportunity in which thoughts, feelings, understandings could get in the way and just, you know, basically break the trip, you know, break the journey to the goal. So for me, you have to be able to realize that you're both a listener and a speaker, and you have to be ready to speak and to listen. You have to, you know, basically input, output. You have to be willing to output, and at the same time receive the input from the other party. And you don't have to attach so much emotion to it, unless that's the goal.
Yeah. All right. I was gonna actually add something to this bit, but it is not coming to mind right now. Yeah. Well, actually, I suppose this might be it. I was wanting to sort of come back to this idea of seeing beauty, and you know, this might be a bit too philosophical, or not existential, but yeah, possibly too cerebral or philosophical, in just trying to understand, like, I suppose maybe I can sort of talk about this particular point. Is there some sort of neurological state which better enables one to see beauty compared to, like, compared to not being able to? I don't know. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
There's definitely the chemically induced.
Yeah, no, that's not what I was referring to. There's definitely that. And actually, weirdly enough, I was watching this thing the other day where this guy was talking about, I think in America, Illinois or Ohio, a bunch of states have now legalized, after the legalization of weed, of marijuana. Now, what are they called?
Psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, psychedelics. That's it. So there's like psychedelic therapy and stuff. But no, I was actually just talking about, like, just default state of mind without any sort of chemical intervention. Yeah.
You know, it's really based upon the person, and, you know, or the people, and where they are mentally or physically. You know, we can't perform all the time. We can't engage all the time. We can't read. We can't cover all the time. You know, we do get worn out. So, not addressing, you know, where, but, you know, being tired or being overstimulated is not a great place to engage. You know, ultimately, people are most creative, in my mind, or more open to collaborating in the morning or in the late hours. You know, a lot of times we're more open in the morning because we're conditioned to say, the sun's up, open for business. So we accept it more. But at night, we're a little more creative. We're feeling you know, the dark powers come upon us. Let's talk, let's mingle, let's get out, let's see what's happening. So there's a combination of both, but it's highly defined, determined on a personal level how that person is feeling, and also, you know, what their past experience has been.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I suppose actually what perhaps I was trying to get at is, in the same way you've got the connection between folks who are less empathetic, so closer to, I suppose, the psychopathic, are better able or are found in sort of, you know, positions of authority, you know, somewhat maybe because they're in a, you know, better disposition in terms of making sort of ruthless decisions, right, in a way that, you know, doesn't tax them, you know, particularly emotionally. I was wondering whether such a state exists, I suppose, in that affects those who are creative or able to see beauty, I suppose.
Well, I mean, you know, there's an art and beauty in destruction, and there are a lot of people out there that are very good at this. I'm going to reference something that Plato said regarding poetry, which you know, automatically places Plato in a place where he doesn't appreciate or want poetry in his life. And he said, you know, poetry, it gives no truth of its own, and it stirs up emotions and thereby blinds mankind to the real truth. You know, there's base Plato. You know,
That's
I
actually,
guess.
yeah,
But,
and you know, yeah, go
I
ahead.
would say the exact opposite. I would say that the poetry is what delivers the truth. You know, the truth is oftentimes the things that we don't want to see or hear or know. We're better off living in that what is the word, selective ignorance or rational ignorance, you know, things along those lines. And regarding truth, the writer David Foster Wallace said something that's quite haunting. He said the truth will set you free once it's done with you. So giving truth agency, oh my gosh, like if you don't realize that, or you know, you don't have to realize it, but if you think about it, what is the truth? And we're all trapped in the truth. The truth is never done with us. We're always searching for it. We might find the truth, aka a fact that, you know, confirms this. But you know, that's a small question. That's not, you know, the big question we all ask as a species. You know, what is the purpose of mankind, or you know, is there a God? Is heaven, hell real?
Yeah, but, I mean, I suppose the Plato reference there is actually quite apt, I suppose, in the context of sort of, you know, the moment that we're in terms of, you know, people not being able to trust information, right, and being manipulated, you know, with what we saw with you know, the psychographics experiments that Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, etc., you know, are running. You know, you get to a point where, because that plays on emotion, right, which is, in a way, from what I understand, Plato is saying in that, that, you know, emotions just, you know, sort of cause a lot of, in a way, turmoil or sort of activity, but lack much of a sort of concrete solution to the problems which which have been used to sort of agitate the person in the first place, I suppose. So right now with, I suppose, all the sort of the media manipulation, it's quite apt. But then at the same time, like, I'm reminded of the saying that goes something along the lines of artists tell the truth using lies. Anyway.
And just to add into that a little bit,
Sure.
I mentioned you were referencing, I believe, the social dilemma, the idea of not believing everything that's online, and all of it's being controlled by these master algorithms. I don't believe that it's not true. I mean, I believe it is very much true. It's very easy to do. However, if you take industrial or organizational psychology, those are generally found in the arts and humanities departments of universities, as opposed to the sciences. But it is a very defined, very powerful artistic science, the science of manipulating massive amounts of people through words and medium. Again, the stop sign tells us to stop. What does this, QAnon tell us to do? What does, any pro-left, pro-light, or right organization, what are they trying? There's an agenda behind everything. Once you realize that there's an agenda, then you can kind of take it in, whether it's true or not, and say there's the agenda. And there's also, the fact that people do like to inflate truth. Storytelling is powerful. Sometimes you inflate the story. If the fish was this big, it was this big. I mean, it's what we do. We have a thing with size, in our mind. Europeans have small cars. Americans have large cars. I don't know what it means, but there's something there.
Not just cars, houses, and the other things. But this is all really, really interesting. I suppose I'll tell you what, let's just actually move on to the next. Haiku code, we spent way too much time on the political stance, but it was, I think, all valid points and worthwhile. But haiku code.
Yeah, so perhaps in an abstract way, I'm applying code and mathematical structures into the haiku. Haiku is 17 syllables, 3 lines, a line that's 5 syllables, the second line is 7 syllables, the last line is 5 syllables. So that's the mathematical structure. So if we can apply math to it, we can apply code to it. And there's another form of haiku in which one artist writes the first line, and then someone else writes the second and third. It's a collaboration. A lot of coding and programming, open source projects are that type of collaboration. Coding and programming. While I'm not I don't have a strong track record in that department. It normally is a collaborative arrangement. Both the developer and the creator. The developer got to where they were because they wanted to create some code. So let's just first say the developer is the creator. They are creative. That's where they started. The creative, the person asking for it is more of a spontaneous burst of creativity, wishing to accomplish something. So both parties are creators. They have a different code source that they're using to do this. But I'm wondering how far you could take something like haiku and turn it into actual code. You know, could you write a code based on haiku? Haiku not only does it have these numeric qualities, it also has a sensory quality where it pulls from nature. You know, you normally have a kiriji, which is a cutting word. You know, it's like a sharp. In the Japanese style, it is the sword, and then it's followed up with a time reference, typically a season. You know, so let's just take that and call it a time event or a time quality. And then there's overall in general the thing that happens in the mind when you read it. So I see the potential of using linguistic poetic structures in math, in coding.
It's interesting.
And
yeah,
I love being wrong. The more times I'm wrong, the more chance I have of being right. So
so what would you say is the purpose? I mean, so like going back, I mean, to be completely honest with you, in the family, I'm not the sibling who's a wizard with words. I'm the visual kid, and so you know, a lot of the things to do with haikus I did not even know. You know, I just thought, you know, whenever I hear haiku, like just weird, you know, a weird version of poetry comes to mind. I had no idea, you know, there's sort of like these constraints that are sort of put upon it. I'm curious, like the laying of these sort of numerical constraints. Is the intention there to make it? Is it just to introduce like a structured chaos and have like weird juxtaposition of words, say, or concepts which usually wouldn't go together, or is there more? Not that is not interesting or enough, but is there something fundamental to the thinking behind linking these two worlds? Because in a way it's mixing English and math.
100%. And yeah, there's a great way to link these together. And you know, you're great with words, and you're great with expressing yourself. So you can't. I'm not going to let you off the hook. Say that you're not that person in the family, because for you, I think the words create more of a visual output, or you know, something that you're visualizing, which is, you know, kind of tied back to the semiotics and the semiology thing that we had mentioned before. But you know, to tie this back to Ada Lovelace, one of the things that she was able to do was take the math and realize that numbers don't just represent numbers. Why can't a number represent an entity or an action? So if we look at it that way, then you know, a lot of coding is calling out. So, you know, pulling in a library or a toolkit, you know, and you have your objects and your functions. So poetry is very much the same thing, you know. And the really unique thing about haiku is that it is the simplest form of poetry with potentially the most impact. You know, there's the power of simplicity, which is really unique and powerful.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose. Yeah, in a way, perhaps actually, ultimately, what maybe all of this is kind of culminating to is one thing which is lacking something is trying to find it in a different thing. By that I mean, the English, the spoken word is lacking much efficiency, which can be found in, say, the world of numbers, right? So, like in the same way, you've got, say, objective programming, right, where you've got, you don't have to hard code every single function. You could just reference, a set number of commands in just sort of like referencing a particular library kind of thing. And I suppose a manifestation of this, an interesting manifestation of this, is perhaps domain specific languages, right, where you have these sort of concepts which are sort of put into these kind of jigsaw puzzle blocks, and as one sort of tries to solve a particular problem, you're able to piece together particular things or particular concepts in a particular sequence, which, say, solves a problem. And in a way, that sits between the sort of inefficiency of language or spoken word / language, with some of the best aspects of the efficiency of what's the word, of numbers. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, because in a way, like, you've got one which lacks something that the other has, and the opposite, and vice versa. But then at the same time, you do not want, at least from my understanding, say, of a language like Latin. I believe what was great about Latin is that it was able to to be very descriptive, right? So you had like a word for every single thing, or you had a particular structure where if you came upon something new, you're able to sort of logically create like new names or signifiers for it. Repeat. Yeah, but then maybe the reason why that language is dead or extinct is because it tried to do too much, and so all the derivatives from Latin, like English, etc., are much simplified languages. And maybe at the end of the day, like, math and English really ought to be separate, and not and one should not try to do what the other does, if that makes sense.
Forgive me, a phone came in and pulled my Bluetooth away.
That's all right.
But let's take a couple of things there that you. All right, so I'm going to be turning the phone off for our real go-through, because I can't have this happening, because it does happen quite a lot. So I'm gonna start back with language and programming. Neil deGrasse Tyson, on one of the shows recently, said something along the lines of, people turn to math and to coding to escape the ambiguities of of speaking or engaging with humans. Code is secure. It's a result. It's a standardized set protocol. Type this in, the machine does this. Have you seen developers getting mad at the machine or having problems and saying, why isn't this working? Well, I mean, that's what they do when they're talking to other people. You know, why is it? You know, if you're having a conversation with someone and
this is now just comical.
It never fails. You know, whether or not you want to communicate in language, in the spoken language, in English, or whatever language your society uses, or if you want to go to the scientific language of coding and programming, good luck having it be all easy, you know? I mean, look how many languages are coming up today in the programming world, in the world. It's mind-boggling. You know, I feel like people are creating new languages to do new things all the time, like the domain-specific language where that comes from. You know, where some of these really obscure computer programming languages, just to tie it back to Ada Lovelace, there's a language called Ada. So all of these things are born out of creativity and to get to a goal. What was around the second part of what you were saying? There's a couple of things that I pulled out of there that I want to touch on.
Yeah, well, the Neil deGrasse Tyson point was actually really on point. Yeah, like people, like the idea of people trying to find logic or escaping to a world that makes sense because, you know, the verbalized language or human spoken language is too ambiguous, and you know, I suppose the cognitive load on the brain, you know, would be so much that, like, one would understand from a psychological standpoint, wanting, you know, to go away from that and to find solace in a world that makes sense. And in a way, this kind of links back to the point, or the question I was trying to make sense of, which is, you know, like the story, something of the boy in the night, the curious case of, is it the dog in the night, I think, right, where you have
the dog barking in the night or something, I think, maybe.
It's I believe it's a story where you've got this kid who's somewhere on the spectrum, and you know, he's actually, because he's on the spectrum, like he's able to solve, I think, how the dog came to be killed or something like that. Yeah, so you know, I suppose being on the spectrum, you know, kind of, you know, coming back, you know, to this idea of, in a way, the brain as I don't know, maybe as a computer of sorts, and you know, in a way, you've got on one end sort of centralization, you know, like monolithic architecture, and then on the other end you've got the opposite of that, basically, where what one wants is, you know, to be in the Goldilocks zone, right, in the middle. And with humans, right, if you're the version of this, I suppose, would be someone who's, you know, overly emotional, right, would be on one end of that spectrum, and then overly analytical, like without empathy, would be on the other, kind of thing. And so to answer your question, I feel like you've touched on the essence of what we're sort of trying to get at, which is, with language, you know, I suppose much like life, right? You know, there's life and there's death, and there's life and there's death, you know, and it's this cycle, right? So in us trying to find, like, like the Tower of Babel, in us trying to find like one perfect language that computers and humans can very efficiently communicate, and not just communicate in the now, but also communicate like information that had to do with events that happened well into history, as efficient and effectively as we're able to just communicate, like, oh, I like the taste of this food, kind of thing. Trying to find that efficiency, maybe it's sort of like a fool's errand, or maybe we're just destined to sort of have this this ebb and flow, this death and resurrection kind of flow, and just and value newness coming from that, as opposed to getting to an equilibrium which wouldn't sort of achieve that, so to speak, if that makes sense.
It does. And I remember one thing that I wanted to touch upon, which was the reference to Latin. We kind of think of it as a dead language, or not really, used very much. But if you look at all of the languages that came out of Latin, it's still around. It's just invisible. We don't even know it so much. Semper Fi, Carpe Diem. There's so many different Latin words that are just part of our, societies. That's we just accepted it that. We don't take the time to say, what does that mean? A lot of people do. I mean, Carpe Diem's pretty easy. Seize the day. Yeah, grab the day. Like, how do you grab a day? It's still this thing. And the other thing, Latin, was a form of power. Language as a form of power is thing. I am powerless against computer programming. And the social dilemma. Those are things that are done not specific to language or coding, but coding society. Breaking the code of society and how we think, making us go left. Choose one or the other. So all of this is really coming from a sense of power. Where is that? Who holds the power? There's a great saying that he who controls the pen, controls history. So whoever's writing or telling the story controls, the past, present, and future, until someone seizes the pen. The pen is mightier than the sword, type deal. Yeah. So I didn't get to actually address your question though there, because I remembered that the Latin source of power was what I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, no. I mean, again, this, as is quite sort of key to everything that I do. It's about the informality. Like, we've got enough structure, right? We know what we want to talk about. We know how long roughly we want to talk about these things. We've not kept to it, but that's neither here nor there. It's about the free flow, and sort of having the spontaneous, sort of serendipitous journey through all this. So I feel like, in a way, wrapping up this particular haiku code bit, what I'm reminded of is what recently came to light with and also what you just said about the pen being mightier than the sword, right? And conversations that you and I have had about the importance of design and bringing design into the crypto world, right? I'm reminded of the recent news that took place. On one hand, right, so you've got Google, who have DeepMind, and they're able to, announce this really huge discovery regarding protein folding, right, with AlphaFold 2, and a discovery that that will possibly mean, we are going from sequencing costing 100,000 to 1 million, right down to like pennies/cents, right? That is huge. And what that means for drug discovery, for just understanding diseases and mutations, like it's huge. So there's that, which is awesome. But at the same time, there is the question of how to regulate AI, how to what are the best practices of using it, right? As we speak, dude, like I don't know, you follow me on Twitter, so you've probably seen, or probably not, because we're trying to, prepare this talk. Um, but I kid you not, there's an article like no older, no, that doesn't make sense. Basically an article. Let me just quickly try and jump to it and find it. Profile an article. Well, here's a tweet, right? Satellite controlled machine gun with artificial intelligence, in quotes, used to kill Iran's top nuclear scientist. Revolutionary Guards commander says. Right, so there's that, and there's the person who works at Google in the last week basically was weirdly fired, but then Google was saying that she quit. Right, the person who was responsible for oversight in terms of their AI sort of practices and how it relates to things like bias and all that kind of stuff. So in a way, like, all of this comes back to like the importance of having our humanity at the center of these things, right? Because yeah, in a way, as someone has said, like, with AI we are basically sort of like rousing the devil, or that's not the exact
but it's true. We're creating our demise, I guess.
yeah,
maybe.
somewhat. Yeah, if we do it, if we get it wrong, if we do it wrong. So I feel like, yeah, that's quite pertinent and sort of relevant to you saying about he who who writes history, is the person who holds a pen is the one who basically controls history, and the pen is mightier than the sword, and so we need to get, I suppose, pens into many people's hands, and less swords, or maybe in this case the computer is actually the sword. But anyway, moving on to the final point.
That's great, because I'm sitting here thinking about it. Is the computer the sword? Is the keyboard the pen? Which one is it? Another one is Cambridge Analytica. The things that they did. With Facebook. There's so many ways of so many examples already of irresponsible algorithms, anti social good programming. And this really goes back to using computers to execute institutional, industrial, organizational psychology. So that just makes it even powerful. And there's a really tricky thing. When you name something, when you label it, you've already done something to it. So that's one of the things that is important here. And it's very important in programming. Topologies and file naming systems and structures. Ultimately, we don't want to think of it as language, because these are words we're applying, but it is it's a language. It's something that you can understand to find it, and to hopefully, ideally, if it's programming, allow the computer to do what you want it to do. And with that, I'm just going to say, when we're speaking, are we often not trying to get a result out of it, getting someone to do something, or it's the same thing, trying to achieve something, whether it be, honey, will you do the dishes, or the multitude of opinions on social media. We're wanting someone to engage, whether it's right or wrong. Honey, we want your confirmation of our inadequate or in ill-informed ideas. We'd rather be wrong with a lot of people than right with two.
Attention economy, yeah. Interesting. Right, so crypto experiment, the final point.
Okay, so to tie this into crypto, there's a big push using non-fungible tokens to store, to be the place where store value inside of art or creation. And the experiments, when we do it live, is going to be taking the structure of a haiku and not using words, but using icons or potentially public keys, or not real public keys, but just ideas of them, or just QR codes, and see what that would create. And then the other part of haiku, the other branch of it is the ranga, which is actually, no, it's not ranga. It is hoku. It's the collaborative experiment where you've got two poets, two writers, and they write one haiku. Someone does usually the first and third line, and then somebody does the middle. So you've got the one, and then you've got that second that comes from another mind, and the first one has to tie that together in the end. And it's a cascading collaboration. And the structure. And the funny thing about the structure is, normally of haiku or hoku, you almost need to read the last line first to understand, what's going on, which is somewhat true with programming. All of your README files are at the bottom. Like, come on, put it up at the top so I can just get to it. Like, that's where I need to read first.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the thing that comes to mind is, the first thing was, I know people who, whenever they pick up a book, they jump to the last page first and read that, read how it ends, and then start the book. Some of the reasoning is, because they want to know whether it's quality, or they want to know if it's worth reading, or they want to, in a way, mitigate or sort of ensure that if something were to happen to them, they've somehow read they know how the story ends, which is odd, because you could get into all sorts of like psychological breakdowns of what you could psychoanalyze that person, or you could sort of arrive at some psychoanalytic conclusions as to the state of that person's being or mind or history, their background, etc. So that was one thing. The other thing is actually, like chess. One idea that I actually apply a lot in my life is the concept. I suppose it's somewhat attributed to chess, where understand, like, learn from the end game, like start there and then work backward. Right. So perhaps maybe in the context of the haiku, as you said, like it making sense by you actually looking at the last section of it, is an interesting bears an interesting bit of learning that we can perhaps sort of borrow from. And I suppose to just to go back to our previous conversation before we actually jumped on this call, my understanding of this final section, was that the intention was to sort of have a conversation about, okay, how does this practically translate to, say, someone who's a poet, because so far we've spoken about just creative elements or paradigms which are specific to poetry, but not particularly, right? There are a lot of things. This is the beauty of, I suppose, artistic endeavors, also creativity. There's a lot of overlap, right? So whilst this has been specific to poetry, the others, the other elements which are applicable to different disciplines, or different perspectives. And now in this particular last sort of experiment bit, the idea is to communicate that, okay, say, as a poet, right, historically you've not been able to, in a way, transact or have value exchange, right? You create a piece of work which is valuable to a few people, but it's, aside from, say, the poet going to, say, a poetry slam or something, and then that perhaps gets recorded and put online and people get to view that video, and they get some exposure, so they gain some sort of social capital from it. Aside from, say, that, on sort of on some level, on a different level, if you're able to utilize networks and, I suppose, your time to have so much work that, say, a big publishing company then publishes, say, like an anthology or something, and then you're able to somehow extract value from your work, I suppose exchange value, exchange value in terms of people who appreciate it, and you having done it, kind of thing, in sort of sales of the book. And now what crypto, as you just outlined, what crypto does is that it presents this opportunity for an NFT, right? And what an NFT is it's a non-fungible token, right? So it's the equivalent of actually, do you want to explain sort of the equivalent of what an NFT is, say, in IRL, or shall I attempt to?
No, I don't want to do it, but I want to just express some of my problems, why I don't want to explain it.
Sure.
Right now, NFTs, we're comparing them to kind of like baseball cards, kind of like art, and kind of like in-game items. The last updates from IoT Cardano said unique items. So what does that mean? What does it relate to? Unique items. If I pull from my insurance background, we call those art, jewelry, paintings, anything that's a unique item. We call it a personal article. Well, that's just a horrible name. The insurance industry's got a very horrible history of naming things personal article, which is a form of an inland marine policy. What? Those words don't need to make sense to anybody. They're just, stupid. So I don't fully understand the true potential of NFTs, but I'm very much into exploring beyond what we're calling them now as in-game items. I don't quite understand the value, how it stores value. One thing is you could ideally, theoretically, own part of Mona Lisa, fractional part of it. Is that the fractionalization of value and ownership? Is that an NFT? NFT IRL mean?
Sorry, yeah, but I feel like that's actually a really good note to end it on, because I feel like the current state the ambiguous state of its potential and in a way what it is. I mean, you've referenced baseball cards, right? But I think the only thing I would add to that is this is a digital version, which I suppose a baseball card you can be able to replicate it. An NFT is something which digitally is impossible to replicate because of its nature, of the way it's constructed, right? And therein I feel like lies the value. But at the same time, because we're quite early, and say you said a poet could sort of have the poetry somewhat enshrined into an NFT, and be able to have it be traded. We're still in the early days, and I feel like it makes sense to acknowledge that and not be like, oh yes, we're here and we know everything and we've got all the answers, and you know what I mean, because it's not about that.
No, absolutely. It's about possibilities, and ideally finding a way to communicate and create the community and the collaborative environment to have a place for the logical and the abstracts. Realize that that's harmony. Once you combine and execute, you get the two together. You got your chaos and your control.
On that awesome note, cool. Yeah, we fade out at this point and stop streaming in 3, 2, 1.